We interrupt this program to give you a bulletin just received from one of our naval units at sea. A large object traveling at supersonic speed is headed over the North Atlantic.
Once a normal, voluptuously beautiful woman, she drove into a nightmare of horror and saw descending from the sky.
Just a minute, ladies and gentlemen. I think something is happening.
Ooh, I feel retrogasmic. 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 With Diddie Deluxe
and Hattie Le Bomb.
Welcome to the Retrogasmic podcast. We are back after the Christmas break.
Happy New Year.
I hope you all had a good holiday and did all those good Christmassy, New Year, Hanukkah, whatever your particular thing is.
Kwanzaa,
yeah.
Festivus.
Yes, and those, yes. Krampus, is that one as well?
I think Krampus is a kind of a demon that eats children who are naughty in Northern Europe.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Fantastic. Anyway, welcome back. We've been very busy recording the new Boom Boom Deluxe album, which is going very well. Apologies for the extended break, but we've got 2 or 3 shows in the pipe, so we will crack on. Now, do you remember our the end of the last show, we were talking about we should do a steampunk show?
Yes.
Well, we are. This is it.
Ooh.
Exciting, I can tell. We are going to be talking to the lovely Kat Douglas, who is kind of the steampunk queen of New Zealand. And we've also got a rare blues track. This is an absolute corker. It's a song by Blind Blake called Diddie Wah Diddie.
Sounds good already.
Triv.
What's the trivia?
Let's kick off with let's kick off with the Triv. So it's all steampunk relevant. Who wrote Journey to the Centre of the Earth? Oh, come on, it's not a hard one.
No, it's not.
You know this one?
Yes.
Yeah, well, you've got edumacation, haven't you? Yeah. You didn't spend your time kicking footballs against a wall, and you actually went to school, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay, so who wrote Journey to the Centre of the Earth? Answers on a postcard. Today's rare blues song is the wonderfully titled Diddie Wah Diddie by Blind Blake. Arthur Blind Blake was born in America in 1896. He is a bit of a mystery. He recorded for about 6 or 7 years for Paramount Records. Not much is known about him. The Paramount Records promo stuff says he was born blind, and they give his birthplace as Jacksonville, Florida. There's a few people have written about him saying that once during a recording session he slipped into a Geechee or a Gullah dialect, which a bit of Googling reveals was like a slave patois. The Spanish brought slaves from Africa down to the islands off the coast of Georgia and Florida. So there seems to be some kind of connection there. But apart from that, no one really knows much about him at all. Ry Cooder copied this song, did a cover of it in 73 or 74, I think, and a couple of interviews have said he's one of his favourite guitarists and he thinks the guy was a genius. So not much else to say, really. Have a listen to this. This is absolutely wonderful. It's off an old scratchy 78. It's Diddie Wah Diddie by Blind Blake.
There's a great big mystery, and it sure is worrying me. This Diddie Wah Diddie, this Diddie Wah Diddie. I wish somebody would tell me what Diddie Wah Diddie means. The little girl about 4 feet 4. Come on, Papa, and give me some more of your Diddie Wah Diddie, your Diddie Wah Diddie. I wish somebody would tell me what Diddie Wah Diddie means. I went out and walked around. Somebody yelled, say, look who's in town. Mr. Diddie Wah Diddie, Mr. Diddie Wah Diddie. I wish somebody would tell me what Diddie Wah Diddie means. Went to church, put my hat on the seat. Lady said on the seat, Daddy, you sure is sweet, Mr. Diddie, boy, Diddie. Mr. Diddie, boy, Diddie. I wish somebody would tell me what Diddie, boy, Diddie means. I'll soon be gone. Just give me that thing you said on my Diddie, war Diddie. My Diddie, war Diddie. I wish somebody would tell me what Diddie, war Diddie means. I got put out of church cause I talk about Diddie, war Diddie too much, Mr. Diddie, war Diddie. Mr. Diddie, war Diddie. I wish somebody would tell me what Diddie, war Diddie means.
And now, on with the show.
Hello.
Hi, Kat, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Now, we have been asked by a few people if we would do a show about the steampunk scene, especially the steampunk scene here in New Zealand. And I put a few feelers out, and it didn't take long for basically everybody to say, talk to Kat. So I'm talking to Kat.
You sure are.
This is fantastic. So let's start at the beginning. Let's assume that people listening in aren't that in the know about the whole steampunk thing, if you like. I think most people are aware of it, but just give us a bit of background. Where did it come from? What's it all about?
Okay, steampunk is retrofuturism, or the future as the Victorians imagined it would be, or how about Victorian science fiction? Victorian science fiction.
Okay.
So it's a alternate reality, basically. So start Victorian and then go from there. And it came about in a book in the 80s. It was mentioned in a very early book, the term steampunk.
So am I right in thinking it's a subgenre of cyberpunk in a way?
Well, it's definitely, yes, it is. It's definitely linked. And, yeah, there's a lot of subgenres now with steam, goth, and, yeah.
Yeah, so while we're talking about the subgenres, again, I've had a couple of people message me and say, well, ask about this or mention this. And what is, now let me get this right, what is neo-Victorianism?
It really is the future as the Victorians imagined it would be. Okay. So we're not trying to strictly be Victorian, but we're recreating elements of it. So you would not have Victorian women going out with their corsets showing, for instance, or ankles on things. And we most certainly are doing that. Right. So we're modernising Victorian clothing. They had beautiful ideas. They had beautiful craftsmanship. It was the Industrial Revolution. There was a lot of scientific innovation. So, yeah, we're just creating it in the modern world.
So the late 80s is where it kind of sprung out of the literature. But surely there's been... I'm not the greatest read of people, but surely things like people like Jules Verne kind of did that. I mean, I'm thinking of Nemo's Nautilus. That seems to me like a steampunk ship.
Yeah, it really, really is. So they had these ideas anyway. They were sort of imagining a different future anyway. When you look at H.G. Wells and things,
Of course, yeah.
so it's just very much, yeah,
Okay.
carried on.
So some of these other subgenres, which I'm finding, I mean, I had put my hand up. I knew nothing about steampunk at all. We are at a lot of vintage events, so we see people from the New Zealand steampunk community there. But you just kind of think, oh, they look cool. But that's basically all I know. What's silk punk?
Silk punk has not taken off so much over here.
Is it more of an Asian thing?
I think it really is. There's a lot of multiculturalism going on in steampunk, which is really good.
That's cool.
So if you look at the Japanese scene and the Chinese scene, you've got people over there doing some pretty wonderful things, and they're bringing their culture into it. And we've got that. Definitely got that here in New Zealand. We've got people bringing, Māori sort of
cool. Yeah.
And colonialism into it, because we're a pretty new country in some ways here. We did not have New Zealand was not discovered by Europeans until the 1700s, and really people really only started sailing here and living here in the mid 1800s.
So it was the Industrial Revolution, so it was right bang on
it
that
really
time.
was.
Yeah.
So
now, a couple of people have said to me that the steampunk scene over here, if you dropped it into the world scene and compared it to what's going on in the States and in Europe, there's a leaning towards diesel punk over here, and then it's more like a kind of a Mad Max car generated thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we definitely have. Diesel punk is big over here. I think that links to things like the gold rush and things. There's a festival in Oamaru, but a festival in Thames as well. Thames definitely has a more earthy feel. It's more Mad Max with the outfits and the, vehicles and things they drive. Yeah. So, diesel punk is pretty huge, and I think that's a lot to do also with Kiwis sort of do-it-yourself
Sure.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Now, talking about vehicles, now, I hope I haven't got this wrong. Someone said to me that you own a motorized teapot.
Yeah, I sure do. It was a yeah.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because that's just such a wonderful. I love the idea of Sunday morning going to Pack and Save in my motorised teapot with a completely straight face.
It is pretty weird and wonderful. I do drive to work in it. It's a broken mobility scooter that my partner and I basically took apart and rebuilt with, hardboard and foam and shaped into a teapot and painted up so it looks copper. It gives most people a bit of a giggle when
Is it road legal?
Well, because it's a mobility scooter, it's legal. Driving it on, so I'm driving it on the footpath.
Oh, okay,
It's not going to run people over.
So it's a moderately paced vehicle. You're not shooting along the highway at 100 k's in your teapot.
Unfortunately not. I'm always hopeful that I can talk my partner into putting a much faster motor into it, but we'll see. So people either think that they're seeing things or they find it a bit of a laugh, and that's good,
That's absolutely wonderful. So tell me, how did you guys get into steampunk in the first place? Because you're obviously really involved in the New Zealand scene. How did you go from being a kind of a normal run-of-the-mill Kiwi to suddenly being involved in this?
Well, back in the day, because I'm terribly, terribly old, I was gothic. So in my teens and 20s, quite into the goth scene.
Right.
But I went to design school in about 2004, and what I was designing was quite Victorian-esque but modernised. And then my flatmate had gone on the internet and found early steampunk creations and said, "I think what you're into is steampunk." I didn't realise there was a name for it then.
So you were already doing it instinctively, and then someone said, "Hey, there's other people doing the same thing." That's fantastic.
I think a lot of people do find it that way. They're making stuff, they're creating things, and then they realise, somebody says, "Hey, that looks a bit steampunk." Yeah.
So when you were at design school, were you making like works of art, or were you making clothing?
I was making clothing, but I always wanted my clothing and designs to be wearable art.
Right.
And yeah.
So now as I understand it, you're best known for your hats. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. Yes, I did train in millinery, and that's which is hat making. It's a bit of a dying art. It doesn't get taught very much anymore, so I was very lucky to get taught that. And that really is my passion, because they're all one-offs, and you're wearing a work of art on your head. You can be terribly flamboyant, and then the rest of you can be perfectly normal, and yeah.
So, do you make a living doing this now? I mean, how much of your life does this take up?
All of it. So I've got a shop called Grimstone and Treacle Emporium in Christchurch, and I make and sell steampunk clothing, and I've got a lot of local designers and artists who sell through that. I run a local group called Steampunk Christchurch, where we meet up and do different things. It might be playing battle croquet at a picnic.
Hang on, I've got to stop you there. You've just battle croquet?
It's not nearly as violent as it sounds.
Oh, what a shame.
I know. I was lucky enough to go to a festival in the UK a couple of years ago called The Asylum, and it would be the longest running steampunk festival in the world. Strictly steampunk, no other genres coming in. And I was talking to a guy there who had invented battle croquet. It's pretty much all silliness, and you are distracting the umpires by throwing flower bombs into the battle pitch, the croquet pitch, which is literally a bouquet of flowers and spies, and it's just...
This sounds like something from Alice in Wonderland. It's fantastic.
It's strange, wonderful, and nobody really keeps up with the rules, and it doesn't really matter.
So if someone wants to check out the stuff you've got in your shop, I'm assuming you have a website?
I sure do. I'm on Facebook, but yeah, I've also got a website as well. Not everything is on there because there's so many individual products.
Of course.
But it's a good.
Do you want to give us a plug? What's the website address?
It's www.grimstone. That's GRYMMSTONE and Treacle.
Grimstone and Treacle.
.com. So find us that way or find us on Facebook. So.
And apart from the stock of, I'm assuming you must have stuff coming in from designers and stuff you're making, but do you do commissions as well? Because I suspect there must be people that have a particular thing that they like and they can't find something. If they want a top hat that's flower proof or something.
Most definitely do commissions. I get quite a few people coming in there asking for particular things, and if I can't do it, I can generally find someone who can do. So
what's apart from the festival you already mentioned, what's the biggest festival in New Zealand that's pretty much kind of steampunk focused or is solely steampunk? Does such a thing exist?
Yes, it does. The steampunk New Zealand festival in Oamaru is the biggest festival in the country, and next year I'm on the committee helping organise that. It's a big team of volunteers. It's in midwinter every year. Next year is the 10th anniversary, so it's going to be huge.
And what sort of attendance does that get, Kat?
You get thousands pouring through the town just to have a look on Queen's Birthday weekend, because Oamaru is a very small little town, but with a beautiful Victorian heritage area. But we've got a lot of people coming in from overseas for next year.
That's fantastic.
From America and a few from the UK.
So it's great for the town as well. It's great for the community.
It's a really good thing for Oamaru. It's pretty wonderful.
So in all of your travels, because I'm assuming you've been around the world going to various steampunk things, it sounds like your entire life is absorbed with this. What's the most extreme or impressive or over-the-top kind of steampunk thing you've seen? I mean, I can imagine. I mean, I'm trying to put myself in the futuristic Victorian thing. I mean, are there things like airships or something?
Yep, airships are great. I've seen things like monowheel cycles, which is a guy sitting inside a large wheel. I think I've got a video of it somewhere, driving around in that. I've seen, extraordinary costumes where one woman had a train so long she had wee minions to help her move. It was huge peacock feathers and things. Asylum in the UK was pretty amazing, but having said that, I've seen some pretty amazing vehicles over here, wheelchairs that have been steampunked up. People have taken Star Wars and, done things with that, turned that into a Victorian sort of, and there are people who are making modified sort of airship vehicles that just drive along the ground. There's a guy in Dunedin who's built a pretty good one. But I think probably the best thing I've seen is teapot racing, which was invented.
Teapot racing?
Yes. Simon Monty from Dunedin invented that, and it's taken off all over the world. So basically you're putting a teapot on a remote control, vehicle, take the car off, do up the teapot, make it insane looking, and you've got to run it round an obstacle course, which
so it's like a remote control car, but a steampunk teapot. Oh, I had visions of, like your one, I had visions of people in mobility scooters terrorising people in the high street. I would love to do that. I would love to do that. That would be great. If only somebody else can build one, or if somebody could build a mobile teacup and sugar bowl, and that would be awesome. A complete dining set, now that would be,
That would be great. I may have convinced a few people that not only is there a teapot roaming around Christchurch, but there's like somebody's driving a toaster oven and somebody's done a microwave, and unfortunately they believed me.
That's wonderful. I mean, not being disrespectful in any way, it sounds to me it's an outlet for people that have a eccentric leaning and don't have in their normal lives don't have a way of expressing that. Would you say that's fair?
Yes, I definitely think that. I also think we tend to get a lot of older people too who sort of have had,
straight-laced lives,
and they're sort of beginning to think it's actually time to have a bit of fun in life.
It's not a very Kiwi thing. Kiwis tend to be quite kind of low-key and understated. So, this is the kind of the flip side of the Kiwi personality. It's fascinating to see.
It really is, because not only, the other thing is I've noticed we've got a lot of very shy people who are quite socially awkward or feel shy, and they've used steampunk as a way of sort of overcoming that, whether it's taking on sort of a steampunk persona and pretending to be that character. but they sort of, have found their way through that. They're talking to like-minded people, and most of us are, geeks. We're into our history, or,
It seems like a very
reading.
mutually supportive, friendly group from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think
Much
it
like the
really,
pin-up
really
scene,
is.
actually. They're a very similar
Yeah.
kind of thing. Everyone's accepted, everyone's kind of encouraged, and which is only, can only be a good thing.
Yeah, it's a great thing, and
Now,
much needed.
very, very quickly, because
Yep.
I won't keep you all day. I could talk about this all day. Obviously, being a musician, I was curious because most sort of subcultures have music, and there didn't seem to be a lot of steampunk music. Now, I did Google it, and I found a couple of American bands that I don't want to be rude, but I wasn't that convinced by. It looked to me like they were kind of a rock band that have decided that if they dressed up as steampunk and made some cool videos, that they might find themselves an audience. Is that fair?
I think it is to a degree. I think there are a number of bands who have just are dressing up in the steampunk clothing, but they really are more rock bands.
For sure.
But there are bands out there doing sort of swing type stuff, music sort of from the 20s. We've got some bands happening here in New Zealand, like the Merchants of the Time Travelling Tea Trade. Yeah, it's a mouthful, which is an Oamaru band. People ask me, what is steampunk music? I think it's a bit like steampunk itself, and it's sort of you decide what steampunk music is to you.
So
but
there's lots of ways of expressing the kind of the core concept, if you like.
it is. I would love to see something using more Victorian-esque type music. I'd love to see
chamber
that.
music or something. Yes.
Yeah, and there are a couple of smaller bands who do that, and you're seeing cellos and things used, and that's beautiful. So yeah, I think it varies from country to
So
country.
just plug your website one more time before we go, because I'm sure people listening are going to be curious to have a look at some of the creations and see what we're talking about. It's
www.grimstoneandtreacle.com. So that's Grimstone, GRYMMSTONE, and treacle like the sickly sweet syrup.
Beautiful stuff. Look, thank you so much for talking to us, Kat. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Trivia answer. Who wrote Journey to the Centre of the Earth? Do you want to tell the nice listener?
Jules Verne.
Indeed, it was indeed. Incredible writer. Wrote 65 novels over his lifetime, although quite a few of those weren't published until after he passed away. When he first started writing, he was a theatre playwright. And initially, he really struggled to pay the bills doing that. So, and he wanted to marry the love of his life, and he ended up working as a stockbroker, which was a bit of a sidestep. But a couple of years later, he managed to get a novel deal with a publisher, and pretty much from then he was on a roll. I think he published about 56 books in about 20 years or something like that. I mean,
wow.
But yeah, I mean, really, really prolific. Second only to Agatha Christie. Is that hard to say?
No.
I'm sorry. Agatha Christie. Second only to Agatha Christie in translations. So I think he's had his books translated into about 150 languages.
Wow.
So that's more than the Bible, that's quite a thing. Now, there's a weird thing with these translations, though, because a lot of them were done in the late Victorian era, and his books were kind of regarded as being almost like children's books, not quite, but what we would call teen fiction nowadays.
Yeah.
So they weren't really taken seriously as novels.
It's because all the sci-fi nerds hadn't come out yet.
Well, I guess, yeah. And one of the things that happened is that a lot of the books were really, really badly translated, rather through incompetence or on purpose. So a lot of his books have got lots of the stories is missing. Some of the books have been dumbed down like hugely, so they've become, in whatever language they were translated in, they become a child's book. But even things like the measurements, he's quite technical in some of the science in the novels, and even the measurements are just completely wrong, which is, you wonder how that stuff gets through the publishers, Poor man suffered very badly with ill health. He had several bouts of quite severe facial paralysis, which I think nowadays it was Bell's palsy, which is very unpleasant. He suffered long-term with repeated stomach cramps, and again, experts now think that was probably colitis. And then as he got older, he also got type 2 diabetes. So that was pretty miserable. And this is a real corker to add to that. In 1886, his nephew, who he was very fond of but had quite severe mental illness, shot him in the leg on a family visit. Yeah,
That's not very nice.
And it left him with a permanent limp.
Ooh.
I'm thinking he comes off the people to invite round to Christmas
Oh,
list.
but it makes him so much more steampunk because then he had a cane.
Yeah, but this was pre-steampunk, so
Yeah,
he
but-
didn't know that.
Yeah, but we know it now.
Now, the amazing thing about his writing was that lots of his futuristic technology in his novels basically came true. And now, we've talked about this before, you could argue that scientists, when they're looking for solutions to problems, look back at science fiction just as a starting point, and things go from there. There's the famous thing with Thunderbirds 2 being the first idea for the space shuttle. That's actually true.
But where's my flying car?
Well, there are flying cars. They're just terrible and very
They're
expensive.
not like the Jetsons. That's
No.
what I want.
You just want things to look like the 1950s.
Yeah, because it was futuristic but still retro, you know?
A classic one is the Nautilus, Captain Nemo's electric submarine. That was about 1880 something, and by the late 1880s, I think 1886 or something like that, they actually did have battery-powered submarines, and it's obvious where the idea came from. He wrote about skyscrapers, elevators, cars with internal combustion engines way before that was a thing, electric city lights, and things like city planning, like suburbs, that just didn't exist, and all of those things later on became reality. Also, he talked about mechanical calculators like computers that could communicate with each other or over a network, which is basically one of the very first mentions of the concept of the internet, and that was 1828.
Wow. But did he predict that it would be the number one way to share cat memes?
Probably not. No.
Didn't see that coming, did you?
So, yeah, an incredible guy. Considering how sick the poor fellow was, he lived an amazing life and churned out, well, that's being rude, he produced an amazing amount of work. So, Jules Verne, hats off to you.
Retrogasmic. Well, it's time to say adieu again. What have we got coming up next time?
Next show, we have friends of the podcast, the Recliner Rockers.
Oh yes, the legends that are the Recliner Rockers. One of the hardest working bands in New Zealand.
Just superb fun live. Even if they're playing to, a couple of people at a party or something like that, they put on a hell of a show.
A show is an understatement. It's like not just music; it's acrobatics, it's a circus performance, it's everything.
It's performance art. We love them, and they're absolutely lovely guys too. So, yeah, it'll be a good chat. We have another rare blues track.
Oh yes.
I think this one's from about 1930 or something. That'll be cool. No Winky. She's away on holiday at the moment, but we'll have some more Winky in future episodes. So Winky lovers, do not despair. And a movie review maybe in...
Well, we'll see. I'm very busy.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. Normal stuff. Show us some love on whatever kind of social media things you hang out in. Leave us a review. All that kind of stuff really does help us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Retrogasmic.